Welcome back, curious souls! What do these video clips have in common? Well, think back to our first unit. Do you remember some of the reasons why a person might choose a religion? On a personal level, someone may want to make a personal connection with a higher power. Thanks, me from the past. All the intro clips show worshippers making a personal connection with a higher power. But the way that religions approach belief in a higher power can vary greatly. Today, we're going to investigate these approaches and see how they might affect worship. Ready? Let's go. Before we dig deeper, you may have noticed that we've completed our study of each religion. So why are we still in the Library of Faith? Well, in this unit, we'll be looking for common themes in the religions we've studied. We'll also explore how these religions approach some of humanity's big questions about life and the universe. Today, we'll examine similarities and differences in how faiths approach theism. What do you think this term means? Theism is the belief in a god or gods, but we can add prefixes to this word to give it different meanings. You may remember that monotheism is belief in one god. Polytheism is belief in multiple gods. But that's not all. Pantheism is the belief that a higher power permeates everything in the universe. In other words, God is everything and everything is God. Then we have non-theism. What does that mean? Non-theism is a viewpoint that does not include the belief in a God. Non-theism doesn't necessarily reject the idea of a God existing. That's known as atheism. But it doesn't center on belief in a deity. So what image or symbol could you draw to represent each type of theism? Take a few minutes to formulate your response. Want to see what I drew? Yours could be different, and that's okay. There are many ways you can make these concepts come to life. I drew a single circle for monotheism for one God. It's filled in, representing the presence of God. I drew several smaller shapes for polytheism. They're all unique, reflecting deities with individual traits. Here's a web showing the interconnectedness of a pantheistic view of the universe. Here's an empty circle for non-theism. It's not necessarily excluding the existence of a god, but it's also not focusing on God either. Now, try to place each of the 10 world religions that we've studied into one of these categories. How'd you do? Some might have been easy. For example, the Abrahamic faiths and Sikhism are all monotheistic. And although we mentioned that some Hindus consider their many gods as a part of Brahman, Hinduism is usually classified as polytheistic. Traditionally speaking, Shinto is also polytheistic. But what about the other 4? Taoism is often considered pantheistic. While the Tao isn't specifically a deity, it is a force embodying the natural state of the universe, and it's the main focus of Taoist philosophy. And some might identify elements of pantheism in Hinduism, especially in groups that focus on Brahman's all-encompassing nature. That leaves 3, Buddhism, Jainism, and Confucianism, that are non-theist. While the Buddha and Bodhisattvas guide others to enlightenment, and Jains revere the Tirthankaras, none of these figures are worshipped as gods. And while Confucianism can be intertwined with spirituality, some see it as strictly an ethical guide. How did you do with these categories? Did anything surprise you? How do you think that these various approaches to theism impact belief and worship? Let's find out. Often, the way a religion approaches theism can influence both worship and practice, as well as ethics and behavior. In your guided viewing, follow along and add categories of theism to your notes, as well as the characteristics of that category. So, which category is most likely to universally follow a set of ethical standards? If you said monotheism, you got it. Why do you think that is? Well, monotheism is based on the belief in one God. God is seen as all-powerful and able to set standards for right and wrong. For example, do you remember God giving Moses the 10 Commandments? These laws set the standards for right and wrong for Jewish followers. Another similarity is that monotheistic religions usually emphasize a theological study of a holy book, like the Tanakh, Bible, Quran, and Guru Granth Sahib. These holy books often contain the ethical standards mentioned earlier. Monotheistic faiths are also more likely to have uniform rituals. Why do you think that's the case? Well, many believe that God has provided instructions on the right way to worship. Of course, we know that how people interpret these standards varies. Remember the Goldbergs, the Orthodox Jewish family we met? Their Shabbat rituals look much different than those of the Riveras, who are part of the Reform branch. But in the end, they're still both observing Shabbat, right? Additionally, monotheistic faiths such as Sikhism and the Abrahamic religions often use prayer to connect with God. Of course, there are exceptions, but for the most part, monotheistic religions and their denominations share these commonalities. How else might monotheism influence how a person interacts with the universe and others? See if you can think of any ways that we didn't mention. On to our next group. Which do you think emphasizes a deity's specific roles in the universe? If you said polytheism, you got it. Think back to Hinduism. Remember how Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the preserver, and Shiva is the destroyer? And how about Shinto, with gods and goddesses for the sun, moon, and storms? These deities often reflect elements that are vital to nature or society. Polytheism might also include stories of interactions between deities and humanity, such as Arjuna and Vishnu in the Bhagavad Gita. These interactions teach moral lessons. They serve to guide interpersonal relationships and social norms. Polytheism can also influence the diversity of practice. In traditional worship, a kami, or Shinto nature spirit, representing the harvest, might be offered small portions of food, such as rice. On the other hand, a sea kami might be offered seaweed or salt, representing the ocean. This diversity of worship, also present in Hinduism, can extend to chants, prayers, or festivals to different gods. How else might the belief in multiple gods influence the way a person interacts with the universe and others? See if you can think of any ways that we didn't mention. Which type of religion do you think encourages worshippers to follow the natural order of the universe? Did you guess pantheism? If so, you're right. Remember, pantheism is the belief that a higher power permeates everything in the universe. So pantheistic religions like Taoism focus on how a person can connect with the universe and, in turn, the divine. Pantheistic faiths often include ethical standards that aim to treat all beings and the environment with respect. After all, the divine encompasses the whole universe in pantheism. What practices might pantheistic faiths have in common? While not unique to pantheism, meditation is common. For example, Taoists believe that meditation helps someone to align with the natural way of the universe. How else do you think that seeing the divine in every aspect of the world influences the way a person interacts with the universe and others? See if you can think of any ways that we didn't mention yet. Finally, which religion's practices might tend to focus on each person's responsibility to shape their own life's course? That would be non-theism. Think back on the non-theist religions you've learned about. Buddhism has the Eightfold Path, which can help a person end their suffering. Jains hope to generate positive karma in order to break free of samsara and achieve enlightenment. And in Confucianism, practitioners try to maintain social harmony by following the 5 relationships. Therefore, meaning and purpose in life may depend less on following a divine power and more on following community standards and practicing self-improvement. How a Jain finds meaning in practicing non-violence, for example, depends much on themselves and the benefit derived by the community. Another commonality is that ethical values in non-theist religions are often based on principles rather than set rules. For example, a Buddhist strives to practice right intent. This is based on the principle of compassion. However, the way right intent is applied may be adapted based on circumstance. A practitioner of a non-theist faith may focus on developing these values within themselves in a way that allows them to apply them in their life. And while each person is responsible for their own actions, non-theist traditions often balance personal growth with an emphasis on upholding these ethical values for the greater good. For example, Jainism focuses on non-violence out of consideration for all life forms, like Lord Mahavira did for the snake. And Confucianism includes Ren, prioritizing others over self. How else might choosing not to focus on the worship of a deity in a religious tradition influence how a practitioner interacts with the universe and others? See if you can think of any ways that we didn't mention. So, curious souls, do you feel like you have a better idea of how various approaches to theism impact worship and practice? If you need to, feel free to go back and fill in any notes that you missed. Alright, curious souls, in this lesson, we got a chance to examine how theism might influence religious practice. But why am I out here in the cosmos, you may ask? Well, curious souls, this is where I come to ponder life's big questions, such as, what is the meaning and purpose of life? Next time, we'll take a look at how religion approaches this question. Until then, stay curious.